Jim is an operational intensive care paramedic who's currently employed by the ACT Ambulance Service. Jim has worked in pre-hospital care for 32 years in a range of metropolitan, regional, rural and remote settings. He's been actively involved in change management and industrial issues in several ambulance services over time. He was long-serving elected director of the NSW Ambulance Board. He serves as the inaugural secretary of the National Council of Ambulance Unions and is working on NCAU's project as project officer to oversight the coming into the AHPRA fold. Are you sure you want to do that? Yeah. So look, welcome. Before I leave here, I just want to state that one of my roles is as the director of Beyond Blue, and one of the areas we're working in is working with first responders, including the ambulance teams who are suffering a significant amount of distress in their own place. And he's going to talk to us now about their work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and I had a presentation that I was going to play from a Four Corners episode called Out of Time. It was played back in 2009, and it was a story of three whistleblowers in the West Australian Ambulance Service, paramedics, who shone a light on practices that they alleged had led to the death of a significant number of people that were supposed to be being cared for. I won't play it in the interest of saving a little bit of time, but suffice to say, at this point in time, there are 18,000 paramedics in Australia who are soon to become included in the national scheme directly because of the outcomes of that actual investigative program. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the kind invitation to speak today. When I started over 3 decades ago as a raw recruit in the ambulance service of New South Wales, I wouldn't have dreamt that I'd be here speaking to you today about the imminent inclusion of paramedicine as a profession to be recognised in the national scheme. But the question has to be asked, particularly in light of the 8 previous speakers that I've been listening to, whether that's the culmination of a lot of hard work and a crowning achievement, or whether it's going to be indeed a situation of careful what we wish for. So, the National Council I'm going to talk about today, who we are and what we do. I'm going to talk about why we are supporting inclusion of paramedics into the national scheme. I'm going to talk about what we see the key issues that need to be addressed to take us forward into the scheme, and look at some ways forward to address those particular issues. It's a fairly brief presentation. National Council. We put it together in 2008. It's been put together to deal with issues of national significance to paramedics. Prior to that, we still have 5 separate unions who look after paramedics across all the states and territories, and we decided it was time to have a federal level of lobbying to take things forward. And indeed, inclusion in the national scheme has been reconfirmed as our priority ever since that time at each of our annual conferences. The objectives I've got up there on the board, you can see those. Why did we get involved in this space? Why, as a union body, did we get involved in this space, you might ask? It's really because we haven't had, up until comparatively recently, a consistent national professional body to look after those interests. And even now, they're more interested in the professional interests than perhaps the industrial implications of those. So the unions have always played a role of being almost surrogate professional associations, and indeed we've dealt with professional practice issues and all those sorts of things over time as part of our normal business. And in fact, the Four Corners program is a great example of that. We had 4 whistleblowers who stood up, who shone a light on the fact that there were serious issues of quality, serious issues of safety going on. They affected great change. And the great lesson out of that for me was not the fact that they actually looked at the centrality of quality and safety in healthcare, not the fact that they were brave enough to stand up and, put their heads above the trenches, so to speak. Not the fact that we got, significant staffing enhancements for safe work practices, that they actually instituted clinical governance for the first time, that they started actually reporting sentinel events, which they weren't even doing back in 2009. For me, the big thing about that program was that it it shone a light on the fact there was a unique opportunity there to change the system, and that's what our involvement in registration has been about. We've really been of a view to take a progressive involvement in it, to be inside the tent, to influence change from the inside, and indeed to take a leadership role. So hopefully our members' interests are front and centre at every step of the process, and it's been quite an arduous process over the last 9 years. This was the rationale that we put up there for our members as to why we needed to be involved in this. Patient safety is first and foremost. I mean, paramedics are health consumers as much as we are health providers, so it's very much in our interest that the people that are coming to treat our families and friends and communities are providing safe care. The second issue, and the third one, flexibility in employment, portability of qualifications. Paramedics are in an interesting position in Australia. There's only 8 state and territory providers essentially that look after the whole workforce, and traditionally it's been very difficult to transfer between jurisdictions because of the lack of recognition and mutual recognition of qualifications. So that, from an industrial point of view, has been something that we've been quite mindful of. Protection of titles become more of an issue probably in the last 15 or 20 years, particularly since the resources boom has kicked along. We've got lots of people calling themselves industrial paramedics out there on mining sites, indeed offshore gas rigs, all those sorts of things. No regulation whatsoever of what their qualifications are, who they are, or where they've come from. So that's an important issue for our members who are doing the right thing out there. And the last one is perhaps the most relevant one. We wanted consistent and transparent handling of complaints and fitness to practice issues. I'm wondering whether this might have been the right vehicle to pursue that in, given the previous speakers, but seriously, given the fact that we've only ever had 8 employers, I mean, all of the things that have been raised here by the speakers earlier today are the things that have been happening for time immemorial in ambulance services in Australia. Indeed, in New South Wales at the moment, there is a group, an online community called No More Neglect. They went live a little while ago, and they've got 3,500 members in the space of about 6 months. And they're in the process of advocating for a royal commission into bullying and harassment into the New South Wales Ambulance Service because they haven't been dealt with fairly. So, these issues that have been raised that have been affecting professions generally are not unique to yourselves. They are certainly things that we understand. As I said, we want to take a leadership role to make sure that we're part of those conversations, and we've been very successful in doing that. We've been included in national reference groups, and I'd have to say it's really encouraging that we've actually got good collaboration going on with the employer groups, the Council of Ambulance Authorities. We are working together very much in the interest of the profession, which has been quite heartening. These are the key issues that we see going forward. I've probably picked up a few more over the course of the last couple of hours to add to this list. I haven't got any answers to these. I mean, I've dealt with disciplinary and complaints investigations and things in my role as a union official over the years. I've got some ideas about the best way to go about that, but these are the things that struck a chord with me as to the things we're going to have to sort out before paramedics are actually included in the scheme. And the clock's ticking on that. We're waiting for the national law to be amended. That's expected, I think, in July or August this year. That will establish a board, a national board of paramedicine, and then we'll have 12 months, basically, to set up the ground rules for us in paramedicine and how we're going to interact with the system. So all of those things I'm sure you would recognise as issues raised in the Senate inquiry from last year, and some of them indeed are subject to the Senate inquiry that's working at the moment. The way forward, well, I mentioned the fact that we are collaborating pretty constructively with all of the groups that are involved at the moment. We need to define the role of our national board. We need to look at a best practice model. And I mean, they're nice words, but I mean, we've heard today the impact of not having best practice models and what that can do. And achieving that balance, I think the last point for me is the most important thing between protecting the public, but looking after the individual psychological well-being and welfare of our members as well. I just wanted to finish off by referring to Lord Benson, who some of you may be aware of. He famously defined 9 core characteristics of professions back in 1992, and he said that the most important thing about a profession is that it has obligations to the public, and that's the foundation on which all professions must be built and on which their futures depend. And it really resonated with me, one of the earlier speakers who said, and that's all very well and good, but if you're not caring for the people who, that you're supposed to be out there supporting, that makes it very difficult, and that has to be part of the equation. To praise Benson again, he said the whistleblowers who initiated that Four Corners program, sorry, he didn't say that, but when it comes to the whistleblowers who initiated that Four Corners program 8 years ago, in their practice and in their employment, they were independent in their thought and outlook. They were willing to speak their minds without fear or favour. They did not allow themselves to be put under the control or dominance of any person or organisation, and that didn't impair their independence. And it seems to me that those character traits are very evident with this organisation and the individuals that are part of it, and I look forward very much to working with you so that we can come up with a best practice model. Look, I'll finish off just by saying that what we're trying to achieve, our vision, is very much to achieve a best practice model of regulation for paramedicine. As a greenfields entrant into the national scheme, I think we've got a unique opportunity to do that. We really have. We're not encumbered by relationships with colleges and all the things that maybe have made things more complicated over the years for some of the other professions in the room. We have an opportunity to collaborate with the managers, and indeed our convener mentioned the fact that Beyond Blue at the moment is doing a lot of work in the space of mental health and wellbeing for first responder agencies, and we're not very far off as a union, a national union body, signing off with the national employers body on a statement of mutual support and intent and adopting the Beyond Blue good practice guidelines in that space. And it would seem to me that it would just be logical then to take that the next step and embed it very much into what we're going to do in terms of regulation of the profession, and make that something that's front and centre maybe in our codes of practice and conduct as we go forward. The aim, a fair and transparent process that strikes that balance between looking after the people that we care for, but caring for the carers as well. I'm looking forward to drawing on your collective experiences over the rest of the day. I've enjoyed the conference very much so far, and thank you very much for your attendance.